أهلا وسهلا بالجميع وخصوصي برفاقي وزملائي اللي معنا اليوم. أهلا فيكم مصطفى، رنا، روزين وياسر. يعطيكم ألف عافية وأنا كتير مبسوطة إنه راح نسمع منكم اليوم. شكرا. Hello everyone and welcome wherever you are in the world. Today I'm speaking to you from the occupied and stolen land of the Massachusetts people. People who are not of the past, but are very much alive, present, and remain shepherds to this land, despite settler colonial attempts at erasures. It feels especially an honor to link this affirmation of presence with Palestine today. Our event is called Resisting Settler Colonial Partition, and I am honored and delighted to have my comrades and colleagues, Mustafa, Rana, Rosin, and Yasser, here with us today. Our preparation meeting for this event could have been a series unto itself. And I find myself, as Stephen and I did when we were meeting with them in preparation for our book in Palestine, buoyed by their friendship, their integrity, their revolutionary spirit, their siblinghood to each other and to us as Lebanese Arabs, and to their commitment to a liberated Palestine. A reality as sure as the image seared on all our minds, a Palestinian flag flying over Jerusalem, Al-Quds, defying all settler colonial violence, a reality that cannot be contained or detained by laws that are passed, even just today, banning the flag again. I won't speak much longer because I want you all to have the honor, as I do, to be in community with these remarkable human beings. The only thing we want you to keep in mind is that this whole event and their presence with us today is about presence, not absence. This is about life and living, not death and dying. This is about pain, yes, but this is also about victory in collective struggle, small and big, especially over the span of the last year. So without further ado, تفضلوا حبايبي، شكرا لكم. مصطفى، تفضل. You have to unmute, Mustafa.
Mustafa, you need to unmute.
Okay. So good evening. Thank you, Lara, for this beautiful introduction, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and for organizing this conversation on mental health in Palestine. A conversation on mental health and resistance. Special thanks to Lara and Luke for making this possible. Red Clinic is a real decolonial clinic. Palestine is, among other more or less sacred things, is an open-air decolonial clinic. I work in a mental health clinic at the English hospital in Nazareth. Maana Center. Maana stands for meaning. Maana Center is the only Arab mental health center recognized for specialization in clinical psychology in Israel. It's managed and led by a team of Palestinian clinical psychologists and psychotherapists. It operates within, as I said, the Nazareth English Hospital. Maana Center provides psychological services mainly to Arab Palestinian children and adults, but it does include Jewish Israeli clients as well. Few days after the shocking assassination of the Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, we offered a space to our colleagues to share their feelings. They have spoken up their pain and anger, and they have done it in Arabic. a strong sense of community lingered in the air. We were heartbroken, but not desperate. The room was overwhelmed by the echoes of the lethal violence used by the Israeli security forces against Shireen Abu Akleh and the many hundreds of Palestinian lives targeted in the last year. Since May 2021 uprising that accompanied the latest round of war against Gaza. The assassination scene has been even more unbearable when compounded by the funeral scene. Attacking a funeral, beyond its barbaric aspect, reflected a mad Israeli obsession with Palestinian life and death. Though repeatedly killed, in the eye of the colonist, Palestinians outrageously resisted death and disappearance. The overflowing symbolism of savagely targeting the voice, the pain, and the flags of Palestinians felt real and palpable. The colonists didn't target the Palestinian body and voice only, but the Palestinian psyche as well, i.e. targeted the Palestinian as subjects, or better put, as non-subjects. The Palestinian subjects are repeatedly asked to disappear, to evaporate, to stop breathing, and to withdraw from their very humanity into a suffocated life and silent death, to reduce their existence into a life begging for life. In the colonists' view, the Palestinian subjectivity is hyperactive, hyperkinetic, over-present, and excessively vocal, exceeding the basic human rights to life, to freedom, to justice, and to land. The intense and moving conversation at Maana Center, at Maana Clinic, could have never taken place elsewhere in Israel. Palestinian clinicians who usually do their internship in Israeli institutions are expected to minimize their presence as political subjects and to practice self-silencing when it comes to their existence as discriminated and sophisticatedly oppressed native minority in Israel. A similar silencing is extended to the academy and to all fields of production of knowledge. Palestinians' mental health is inseparable from their colonial context. The Palestinian psyche is the ultimate arena of the Colonial Settler project. Indeed, the Palestinian scene under occupation and colonialism is bloodier and more raging than ever. The settler colonial machinery is roaring like hell. The apartheid escalating while being criminally banalized. The racist politics is being mainstreamed. The descending in fascism is not even questioned. Jerusalem is under a heavy and relentless Judaization. Gaza is under siege. The West Bank is under a brutal violence with army-backed settlers. Just 2 days ago, an Israeli army commander stated, settlers and army are one thing, are the same. Palestine dealing daily with racism and internal colonialism, with nationality law as the final subjectification act. The Palestinians are condemned to resistance, to sumud, condemned to siege their siege, with visionary vocality, with alliance of the rich of earth, with the pessimism of mind and the optimism of will. From Gaza to Nazareth, through Haifa, Jerusalem, and Jenin, and indeed all historical Palestine, signs of undying desire for freedom are set to set a dying colonialism to rest. My brilliant and courageous colleagues will report here on daily life resistance practices in different locations in historical Palestine. There is always something desperate about Palestine, but rightly so, there is always something hope instilling as well. The outrageous vitality of Palestinians is driving the colonists mad. The colonial madness is confronted with a healthy and indeed vital madness of resistance. Before and during the latest heart-wrenching war on Gaza, a project of cooperation between Palestinian clinicians in Gaza and Galilee started. The Gaza and Nazareth project brought together, defying borders and siege, Palestinian mental health professionals from Gaza and Galilee. Speaking mental health and psychotherapy has been an inventive way to uphold humanity in the face of the ongoing settler colonial disaster, and to strengthen the Palestinian community beyond all fragmentations and all colonial fragmentations and artificial geographical divides. Conflating mental health and resistance. And paraphrasing Janis Joplin, Palestine, place of free soul and struggling blues. Palestine is like freedom, is another word for nothing left to lose. Thus, it is condemned to hope, to desire, and to win. Thank you.
Shukran, Mustafa. I mean, what an ending. Yes, we will win. There will be a liberated Palestine. I'm also just holding in mind two things you said that will stick with me forever. That Palestine is an open-air decolonial clinic, and that we are heartbroken but not desperate. And I think that that cuts across everything that you're saying, and I feel really sets the tone for us today. So thank you so much. Rana, تفضلي.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I was trying to see if I can do a share screen because I want to show I have a presentation that I would like to share with you, but I was trying to do it, but not successful yet. But I will do it again. Good evening, everyone, and again, thanks for Lara for convening us, for bringing us together. It's always a pleasure for us to be together and talk. And I think, like Lara was saying, even when we had a pre-panel meeting, it was so important and so rich, the conversation that we had, where we also, and I think that was one thing that we wanted to bring to this panel, is the sense of resistance and defiance, and not bring in the issue of victimization. So first, Lara, thank you, and thanks for the Red Clinic for inviting us, and for me, as someone who believed in equality and in also the idea that one has to give to the person who needs what they need. I feel that the Red Clinic is really is so important, and it's refreshing. And it's refreshing to know that in our day there is something like that still happening. We thought it was long gone since the 80s and 90s, but it's very refreshing that it's still there. I will be talking to you about the Jerusalemite youth. Why? I will be talking about the mental health, or about Palestinian youth resisting settler colonialism through the experience of the Jerusalem youth. And again, I'm trying to get my presentation there, and I'm sorry it's not yet there. It's always a big problem for me to always look for my presentation and share it with you, but I will do it in a minute. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's there. So I'm just trying to check whether I do have the share screen. I do.
You're a co-host, so if you're just at the bottom with the green.
Yes.
Yes. There you go.
Okay. I'm doing exactly that, but I'm not able to get my presentation on the screen.
إذا بدك تبعتي لي إياه أنا فيها أحطه.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to share with you basically is that, I'm sorry, maybe I will be looking at my screen. I wanted to share with you some pictures, but it seems I can't yet do that, and I don't want to keep you waiting. But what I wanted to share with you is that what is prevailing, to talk about what is prevailing among youth today in Jerusalem. And basically that Jerusalem is, of course, is a city that is imbued with history and knowledge. And that knowledge of that is prevailing among the youth is that conquerors come and go. And that this kind of understanding has, for the Palestinian youth, renewed and fortified their patriotism, and it took the place of, if you like, the fear and panic. So basically what is now prevailing is a renewed and fortified patriotism, and this is basically what is driving the and what is the emotional response of the Jerusalemite youth. And we see that whether we are talking about the direct confrontations, we're talking about the protests, or we're talking about the culture, the art, and the jewelry, and social media. That's what we are seeing. And this is basically how the youth in Jerusalem, how we can see the youth in Jerusalem resisting basically settler colonialism. The role of the youth in the struggle for liberation is basically saying that contrary to Israeli systematic policies of co-opting and subduing the Palestinian identity and attempt to Judaize, there is a resurgence of a stronger and clearer identity among the Jerusalemite youth. With this evolved identity, the mission and role in liberation is crystallized. This is apparent on the individual and collective levels. What we see on a daily level, whether the confrontation is individual or collective, whether in Sheikh Jarrah, in Silwan, in the funeral of our friend Shireen Abu Aqle, in the defense of Al-Aqsa, or encountering the settler march in Jerusalem, what we see is that the youth in Jerusalem have an evolved identity. They have a different crystallized identity where their mission again and role in liberation has evolved, and it's clearer to them, and they're able to also make it clearer to others. What I had a picture, and I wanted to show you what Mustafa was talking about, the drone with the flag that was raised in Jerusalem over the city walls and over the march, the Israeli settlers march, flag march, was a clear indication that the Palestinian youth, they know what they want, and they are very, they're able to show it and make it very clear. So,
Anna, do you want to try again? Do you want to try again? عم بيقول لي لوك إنه عاملك sole host. ممكن you can do that.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Now I can. Okay. Sorry. Now I can. So you can see it? Yeah?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes. Okay. So that's what I was talking about. While, for example, the flag, which is like for the settlers, for the Israelis, they see it as a big threat, and they're preoccupied with not allowing it to be raised and to fly. The youth in Jerusalem made it fly you know, like, and of course, as an act of defiance, and also to say that there isn't anything that can stop us. And this is how it was. And of course, on top of the march, of course. So what I was saying, that the Jerusalem, and like I said, sorry, that how did this evolution happen? I'm saying that there is an evolution, there is an identity, there is a new identity for the more crystallized identity for the Jerusalemite youth. How did it happen? Of course, there were many elements. I would say that, for example, one of the most important was Gaza. The Gaza is the model of defiance and resistance. And I'm talking here about the whole model of Gaza, but especially in 2021, where not only that Gaza has proven that it is a model of resistance, but that it came to the rescue of Jerusalem. So when the Jerusalemites were saying, help Gaza, Gaza came to the rescue. So there was this feeling that, okay, we're not alone. Gaza has come to our rescue. The other thing is that the youth feel that Jerusalem has a unifying element. This is the place, it is in the forefront of the confrontation and the defense of the Watan, of the homeland. And this is like a responsibility put on their backs, that there is a need for them to reset the parameters of the confrontation and to address the power imbalances. And this is, they feel that it is their responsibility because, again, of the status of Jerusalem and the importance of Jerusalem. Of course, also the escalation of violence, the colonialist oppression, and of course the continuous attempt to turn the lives of the people to ruin. And I mean, we didn't want to go through and talk about that in details, because we felt that this was something that has been talked about on, and it's something that is said and one can actually see it all the time, whether we're talking about home demolition, we're talking about the killings, the targeted assassination of youth in the street, in the neighborhoods, in the different villages and different communities. One can see that there is an escalation of violence, and youth are targeted. And of course, youth are targeted because they represent the future of Palestine. And of course, colonialism wants that future to be ruined. And of course, those who hold this future is the one who are targeted. The other thing that is very important is that the youth the youth or the people in Jerusalem feel that they were left alone. And this has of course, there is a negative aspect for it, but on the other level, this has helped in their in their understanding that this dependency, which was always that someone will come to our rescue, have changed into something that we ourselves can do it when no one else will do it. And I'm sorry to be using this, but this is a rappers, they're called Shab Jdid and Dabur, and their rap was saying that because half of the people they are, sorry, they're fucked, but they moved and talked about change nothing. Chill, bro, your true colors show in hard time. And this is the feeling that there is. This is a rap called In An. So this is the feeling that there is, that if we don't do it ourselves, and we can, then we cannot depend that somebody else will come and do it. And therefore we are in the forefront, and we are in the confrontation, indirect confrontation with the occupation and with settler colonialism. Also in that rap, they say that, boom, a night's fight we never lose. We demolish mounts if you wanted. Good to meet you. We're Jerusalem boys. We figured it out. We solved the puzzle. And this is again part of the rap. And this is part of what has happened to the youth in Jerusalem. So what is the puzzle? The puzzle for them that they thought is that they have to take control. That at the time when the, of course, I mean, when we're talking about settler colonialism, we are talking about the exercise of biopower. And we're talking about that exercise, that biopower, it's exercising it on every aspect of the Palestinian youth's lives. And of course, it is basically, like I said, basically the target is to prolong and to vindicate the presence of the colonizer, and to prolong the colonization. And therefore, the confrontation between the Palestinian the Palestinian youth who exercise his or her right of resisting subjugation and the Israeli security is a show of power. And therefore, the most important thing is that the puzzle is that the puzzle that they thought is that we have to win, is that we have to take control, and we can. And again, in that rap, that is, like I said, by these rappers, they say that we can. So countering what Israel has been systematically doing, and this is a learned helplessness, and making the people live in a state of unpredictability, where every aspect of our lives is unpredicted, there is a countering of it, and the response of the youth is that the liberation is within our reach. And for that, they had in 2021, there was something called the Manifesto of Dignity and Hope. And this Manifesto of Dignity and Hope, which was again among all the youth in Palestine, it was a unifying manifesto, not particularly for those in Jerusalem, but basically it was this manifesto is saying that we as Palestinian youth are all united in our will for liberation. So we are standing together, because we do believe that in our unity we have the power, and we can. And again, in that manifesto, they said clearly that liberation is within our reach. Where does this will come from? It comes from the ability. They believe in their ability. How did that happen? It happened when they realized, when our youth have realized that even if the settler colonialist and the occupier is trying to control them from the outside, they cannot control them from the inside. They are liberated from the inside, and nothing can actually subjugate them from the inside. So internally, they have come to a feeling of a liberation that is basically saying that nobody can actually drive us there. And of course, how did their organization come from? Basically, because youth do not have any places where they can actually meet formally. So basically they are in the street, and in the street, that's where their organization and their coming together, and this is where their collective is built. So basically what they are saying, even if the Israeli occupier closes our organizations, and of course, I mean, the Israeli occupation have closed so many organizations in Jerusalem. There are only a few that are actually, whether cultural or even mental health or so on, that are still working. But 29 organizations in Jerusalem for youth have been actually closed down. So even with that, the street, which is the place where they are actually meeting, it became that informal place where that became the place where their informal organization was taking place. So basically we do have, of course, we know that colonialism, and of course Israel as a settler colonialist, believe that the only way to actually be able to take the land is to subdue the people and drive them to a situation of helplessness and not being able to resist. At the same time, and of course, I mean, this is where they believe that they can have an order and control. In, you know, like to counter that ruin, that ruin coming from violence, there is the dignity and hope. The dignity and hope is through, again, the willpower, through the collective spirit, and also from an expression that the youth, for example, in Jerusalem, called Khawa. They call it Khawa. Khawa means basically that, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Basically saying, regardless of what or who stop us, we can. So what I wanted to say is basically, and looking at it from our perspective, or from my perspective, is that I didn't say that I work in a center called the Palestinian Counseling Center. And this center started in Jerusalem many years ago in 1983. And this center started as a counseling center basically to counter the pathologizing of Palestinians and the victimizing of the Palestinians. So basically it came into existence to make a very important statement, and that is that we as Palestinians are normal people living in abnormal situations. So even if we manifest certain kind of mental health issues, it is because of the abnormal situation we're living in, and it is not because we are abnormal. And our ability to, and the center was basically saying that in order to make, in order to help the people, the helping has to come by looking at the abilities and empowering them, and building on the strength and building on the assets of the people, and not looking at the problems. And that's where we also wanted to bring our presentation to you. We wanted to bring our presentation through the presenting the assets, presenting our ability to resist as people, and of course through the youth who are actually in the forefront of that confrontation with settler colonialism in Palestine in general and in Jerusalem in particular. And this is where we need the help and activism in basically fortifying that assets and building on that agency and not on the victimization. We are not victims. We are basically people who are living in very difficult, we are living in a very stressful situation for sure, and colonialism all through history is known to actually, one of the main aims of it is to bring people to ruin. But we are still there, we are still standing, and this is what we wanted to share with you. These abilities which we need your help to fortify. We need your support to make it continue and be empowered. How? Of course, we have a lot of suggestion, but BDS is one of the most important things. Academic boycotting of Israel is very important. In general, boycott divestment is important, and we need you to be there in supporting us. What is also very important is through validating and instating and mainstreaming the Palestinian narrative. I think one of the most important things for us is that we are very much always, how do you say, we always are confronted with this problem of that we need, our narrative need to be validated by an Israeli, by the Israeli side. And this by itself is an insult, because we have our narrative and it has to be validated. And the Israeli narrative, like we have seen in the Shireen Abu Akleh, the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, is full of lies, because we know that settler colonialism basically uses every means possible to validate its existence, including trying to present a narrative and to make that narrative prevail. But of course, that narrative is the narrative of the colonial, of the settler colonialist, and therefore it shouldn't be heard and it should be discredited, while at the same time, those who have the right need to have their narrative validated. So we need you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you so much. Wow, so much there. So first of all, I want to repeat, not victims, you're not victims, but you're liberation fighters, right? And I think this is so important, because this is one of the things that you're bringing forward, and that connects to what Mustafa was saying as well, and about whose narratives we platform, right? Is that when there's a settler colonial condition, that is what sets the social order. That's the Fanonian reference that you put. The social order and political order and economic order is set by settler colonial narrative. And what you're inviting us to do is saying every chance we get to disrupt that settler colonial logics, the settler colonial narrative, and give it back to the indigenous. And what you're laying out further, and this is the connection between you and Mustafa, is there are already people on the ground doing this work. So it's even more of a responsibility for us to uplift those voices, to say it's the youth that are telling us what the reality is. It's the trainees at Maana Center that are telling us what reality is. In every other situations, they have to be subjugated. So to invite us globally, as a global solidarity, to not buy into the subjugation, and in fact, to resist it at every turn, and give the platform to Palestinians on the ground, whether they're youth or trainees or clinicians or colleagues, and let them set the narrative, right? Not as victims, but as liberation fighters. شكرا كتير. رزين تفضلي.
واو رنا، واو مصطفى، عن جد يعني when we are asked to come and talk, I always think to myself, how can I convey to everyone else. What a feeling, an experience for someone that has been oppressed for such a long time, to meet again, to talk about our shared pain, share hope. How can I convey that to people, to know what an immense experience it is, and how what we are doing now by itself is an act of liberation. This is always puzzling for me. How could I convey the immense power of coming together and talking to each other? I want to talk about something that Rana said before about being left alone, forgotten, and weak. This is what I'm going to concentrate about in my talking. When we talk about occupation, we always talk about the deprivation of land, water, the siege on Gaza, but we don't always talk about the war on our psyche and how immense powers are put in there. When we talk about occupation that deprived something from us, as an individuals, we are talking about the deprivation of our collective identity, the feeling that you are part of a nation, that you share this pride as being part of a nation. When we talked about when Rana talked about oppression and liberation, I think that these are two powers that we as Palestinians living here struggle all the time with. You are never, I think, fully liberated, and you are never fully oppressed. It's always to remember, even in the smallest action of liberation, there is much fear also. And even when you are oppressed, there is so much hope. But when I talk about the deprivation of our identity as a collective, I talk about, for me, as someone that lives in Haifa and work in schools, when we go around, all the time we see the Israeli flag. But from a young age, I have never seen my flag. I'm not allowed even to hold my flag. When we at schools could not and still cannot talk about Nakbah because of the Nakbah law, you cannot talk about Nakbah because, you know, memory is so intimidating for them. It's such a powerful thing to have a memory, to know who you are and then to know where are you going. So we cannot talk about Nakbah. Teachers talk with children in schools about being Palestinian, and what is this identity. They get interrogated. The loop is coming tighter all the time. It's being more tighter all the time. And the things are becoming much, things are becoming very difficult for us. Not since last May, it's before. I think when we talk about the deprivation of our collective identity and this trying to be all the time, to live life, not to get into trouble, just to manage living everyday life. This is what for such a long time occupation thought that he is doing for in a very good manner. Whenever the rope gets tightened on us, we remember that we are part of a group, and we go into the street and we can't keep our silence. This is what happened in 2000. And we Arab that lives here in Haifa and Nazareth, we first really felt our power and our connectivity to each other was in the what happened in October 2000s, when we went to the street and said we are part of Al-Aqsa, we are part of Gaza, we are part of West Bank, and you cannot do this to us. You cannot deprive us the right to be a collective. And then 13 people were killed from us, and this was a very immense experience that stayed in the memory of us all. And after that, we became stronger. When the loop tightened, every time the loops tighten, we become stronger. After that, every war in Gaza, people went to the street and demonstrated, and we said we will not we are part of this nation, and we will not see our people suffering and stand still. This all led to what happened in May last year. But in May last year, I think that what happened for me as a psychologist, what I saw is that thing changed very much than what they used to be. For the first time for me last year was the first time that we as psychologists, when we say we want to go and help our community and help kids that are been going through violence because of settlers and because of the police, and we arranged ourselves in small groups. What happens then is that we started a discourse. How are we going to help each other? Are we going to take what they have taught us? What they have taught us from the West, all the way of thinking, or all the way of helping each other, or are we going to be part of this nation? Go to kids, to youth, stand by them, by their families, and let them decide what they want to do. Who said that their anger is wrong? Who said that they should calm down? Who are we to decide? Maybe what we need to do is be part of this nation, stand still, hold hands, find each other again, and say that we can go through this, and you can decide, and we are with you. Even if you decided to go to the demonstration or not, we are with you and we stand by you. And I think that when I talk about liberation, and when I talk about not feeling a stranger anymore, and not feeling, when you can't find your flag, when you can't talk about your story, you become a stranger. You become foreign in your own land in a certain way. You feel like you feel really like you are forgetting, like you are not part of this great idea of Palestine that they are talking about. For some time, I felt also like that. But whenever the loop tightens and we find each other again and we talk with each other again, this collective power gives us the strength to continue. After that, I think we see nowadays, I think that we see liberation in every act, in captives that do not agree to go to court, the Israeli court, because they think that it's illegal. Or when we see that, for example, us as psychologists, we say that we care about the mental health of our captives, and we want Ahmed Manasra to be freed, a kid that was arrested when he was 13 and he is still in captive, and he's 21 years old. He suffers from a very bad mental situation and body illness, and he is not alone. Even when the lawyer goes and talks to him and his mother, he says, I thought for a long time that I am forgotten, and now I am not. Couple of days I also saw in Birzeit they were having a conference, and there were a captive that talked about her experience, and she said the hardest thing was to think that I was forgotten, that I don't matter anymore. She wasn't put in captive because of something that she did. She was put in captive because of her identity, and that the need to feel that people has not forgotten about me, that what I have sacrificed is not in vain, is very important. And I think this is part of what we're trying to do now, and all the time, to heal as a collective, to find each other again and continue as a collective. So when I talk about the feeling, what we were deprived of, this collective identity, I think that we are taking it back now. And every time the loop gets tightened, we are taking, we know that we cannot go back. We can continue finding each other and working together in different fields. And every little act of liberation, it's like Rana said, it's not only a liberation of the group. It is, you feel it from the inside. When you connect with your own people.
شكرا روزين، يعطيك العافية. Wallah, it just feels like a treasure, all of you. And I know you, and I've been in community with you. And Rosine, this is the first time I have the honor of being in community with you in this way. And it's your reputation comes with you. And Wallah, it spoke to my heart. This one phrase you say, when the loop gets tighter, we get stronger. I feel like that will imprint on me forever. When the loop gets tighter, we get stronger. And it again connects both with the youth defying, right, these constrictions, and then what Mustafa was saying at the beginning, unnatural atomization and geographical separation. Because what you're saying is folks inside the state now known as Israel coming fully out of the sort of oppressive psychic structures to say, no, this is an unnatural separation. And we resist that unnatural separation. And we're in the streets, even if we're separated, we're one, we're united, right? And that in and of itself is an act of liberation, to say we refuse the partition like we're talking about today, and we refuse the borders, because those borders are sham borders. They're borders that overlie what is a contiguous Palestine, right? When I look at the map, when we look at the map, we see a contiguous, connected Palestine from the river to the sea, right? And that reality cannot be erased by settler colonialism. Thank you so much for bringing that home to all of us. Yasir, تفضل, شكرا.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be here with Red Clinic, with Lara, Shiha, with Mustafa, Rana, Rosine, and everyone. I see a lot of the people who are in the attendees who are really close friends and close supporters. So thank you all for being here with us. I don't know, I was thinking what I could give, if I could give a title for things that I am going to talk about, you know. And then hearing what Mustafa began with, going through Rana and Rosine, I think the best title to say for what happens nowadays in Palestine, it's that it's a living example where colonialism fails. It's a living example where occupation doesn't work. We do not need really to see the end of the occupation to know that it doesn't work. We already see it on the ground. And this is already seen by all of us. I'll give several examples, and I'm sure that the audience share with me the same feeling, the same idea. And those were already told by the colleagues, you know. When you try to kill someone, or when you kill someone, someone would think that, okay, we are done with him or done with her, you know. Shireen was one of our Palestinian symbols, you know. She was one of the reporters that continued to pass and to tell the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinian story, not only locally, but also internationally. Shireen perhaps passed away, but she became eternal the day she died, you know. She was human, now she is someone else. And silencing her did nothing but make her eternal, and bring memories of her keep up coming every now and then. And in the last week, when people were trying to cover the media were trying to cover the aggression that was made by the Israelis within Jerusalem, for example, people were all the time remembering Shireen, and she is a figure that will continue to be remembered. And speaking of the Flags March, which is again another story, very interesting one, which is that it's an event through which the Israelis try to celebrate or show the celebration of the, as they call the unification of Jerusalem, which is basically the occupation of East Jerusalem in 1967. So they try to celebrate that day. Well, while they were trying to celebrate that day, we all celebrated a flying Palestinian flag over Jerusalem. It's almost the other way around, you know. Whenever happens to make Palestinians feel that the occupation is winning, it ends up with the other way around, you know, that the people are winning, that the freedom fighters are winning, that the Palestinian people who for certain moment the occupation tried their best to erase their identity. This is something that didn't happen and it will never happen again. And then we heard the story of Rana talking about youth in Jerusalem. Yes, this is a very strong story, and I think the biggest response to the trials of the occupation through the nationality law, what's called the nationality law, to erase the Palestinian identity is a very simple one, and it's something that we don't have to say. It's clear, which as we are present. We are not going anywhere. We are not leaving any place. Palestinians are still Palestinians in the historic Palestine, Palestinians in 48, Palestinians everywhere. This is our homeland, and we will continue to be here with more generations to come. And then the other way is, or the next one is the blockade on Gaza. You know, it's a sad, ongoing 15 years already, 16 years of blockade. Yes, its part could be of a separation policy, you know, which we all know didn't start in 2007 or 2008. This is something historical that began many, many decades ago, trying to divide the Palestinian people and separate them geographically and try to, one way or the other, to manipulate the feeling that we are a unified nation. But look what happened in the recent 2 years, if I could say. In May 2021, we have seen a unified Palestinian people. We were always unified. But it's like, you know, it's like, how to say, it's gold. You need a little bit to clean it from dust and then it will shine again. You know, and that's how the Palestinian people, how the unity is. Well, youth in Gaza, young people were all the time leaving the tension. Everyone says, well, you know, living under siege for 15 years, not being able to travel anywhere abroad, you know, to be exposed to 3 to 4 large-scale operations, then you should be broken. You should not think of anything but just how to get rid of that. Maybe there will be more suicide, maybe there will be more depression, maybe there will be more people thinking of migrating, etc., etc. But for more than a year, in 2018, when the Great March of Return campaigns started, the demonstrations started, it was a clear challenge, a clear agency by the young people that we are still here, that the international community, not only the Israelis, but everyone should hear our loud sound that there are people in Palestine, that there are people in Gaza, that the blockade is something that is not right, that the whole occupation is something that is not right, that uprooting people from their own homelands and making them live as refugees is something that is not right, reminding the international community of the essence of things, you know, the agreements, the laws that were put in place decades ago, but waiting someone to reinforce them. Well, talking about Gaza youth, yes, 15 years of blockade, yes, now 4 large-scale operations, COVID, plus the Great March of Return. But look, there are many wonderful stories. Try to find, we are not numbers, you know, a group of talented young people who will all the time write and report stories from Gaza. Look at Gaza Sky Geeks, you know, another group of talented young people who are doing their best through technology, you know, it's like through computer programming and technology that they can reach out to the international community and challenge the walls, challenge the blockade, and above all, challenge the coloniality and the occupation. Look at Gaza rappers, you know, Look at Gaza parkour players, those sport young people who would just jump within the partially destroyed building to show that we are alive, that we are here, that despite all the challenges, that we really exist, and we are going on with our lives. And then look at all the solidarity that comes in the international community, something that we feel in Gaza that is increasing with time and time. When we were under attack in 2021, as usual, many solidarity calls were coming to myself, to my colleagues, to other workers in GCHP, how can we help? And we had something on the ground running, something that was really amazing, which is that we received a lot of help from our colleagues, whether in Palestine 48, or whether in West Bank, or whether from Jerusalem. And I recall the work that you started with Maana Center, with Mustafa Qossoqsi and Najla Asmar. This is something that we ended the first part of it a couple of months ago, and now we are planning the second one. So, I mean, with all these challenges, they continue to open for us chances to the future. People who were calling from abroad, who were offering mostly one-on-one care, whether that could be psychological support, stress relief, or whatever we can call it. There were a lot of people who were calling, who were talking, who were offering different means of help. And there are also people who were knocking the doors and trying to come to Gaza every now and then. Some of them have managed to come into Gaza. The others were not allowed for crazy reasons. Sometimes I don't know how come a university professor be, for example, a danger to someone or something like that. We are a place that still continue to live under blockade, but still there is a lot of and plenty of hope. And speaking of a lot of the solidarity people who come and join us, I'd like to ask Luke kindly to play a YouTube, and then I'll get back to you. Could you please do that, Luke? Play it, please.
Gaza is my homeland, here beside the sea. I can't think of any place where I'd rather be. There's coffee in the morning, shisha after 5. Gaza in the evening really comes alive. Though they try to drive us out, guns and drones and bombs, we have friends throughout the world who join us arm in arm. When they turn the power off, put us under siege, they soon learn it's all for naught, we shall never leave. And if you'd like to visit us, there's an open door. We'll share what we have with you, try to give you more. When you spend your time with us, you'll be family. You'll see why we love it here in Gaza by the sea. For Gaza is our homeland, here beside the sea. There is simply no place else where we'd rather be. Come and sing our song with us, join our melody. If we sing it loud enough, someday we'll be free. Gaza is our homeland. Someday we'll be free. Salam alaikum.
This is a song by our friend John Van Enwyk, and it's a clear message that Gaza is my homeland. Yes, it's full of hope, and it's a welcoming space. Never give up, people. We have seen Iyad al-Sarraj, the late Iyad al-Sarraj, our founder, there with a Palestinian flag. And this is something, inshallah, that will happen soon, to see the occupation coming to its end, to see a coloniality project that is failing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasser, leaving a smile on everybody's face, I think. I think one of the most powerful things, and you started with it, and then you left us with it, is that the occupation is not working, right? The occupation does not work. And here are all these beautiful examples today that you've given us. And you end with this idea that, you know, someday Palestine will be free. And what I see from here is today, in enacting this, there is a free Palestine. There is a free Palestine in every act of liberation and every intervention. And that's why the occupation doesn't work, right? And it's our job collectively as a global movement and as people who lock arms with you all to make sure that that happens materially too. But there's nothing that can psychically imprison Palestinians in any way, shape, or form. And so I see this as what I think the connections, and I have one question and we'll go to the questions from the audience, but I see the connection that all of you are laying, you know, bare for all of us about the decolonial possibilities, not just of futures, but of what Istvan calls now, the now. You are rooting us in the now, right? We so rarely get to live in the now as a place of decoloniality. It's always a promise of the future or looking to the past. But what you all today are saying is there's actually a decolonial now happening. بهذا الوقت, right now, for all of us. So my question to you all is, what are your sort of most pressing examples of defiance? I think it was Rana who said defiance. What is the decolonial now for you, right? It could be for a patient that you see, but also for you personally. What is the biggest example of the now that you feel, and that feels really important to highlight for people?
The feeling of the now or the sense of the now, well, it's always, I don't know whether it's the now or it's the always. There is always for us this kind of like mixed feelings, and we, you know, since Emil Habibi wrote his important novel, The Pessi Optimist, I think that it describes us Palestinian. We're always Pessi optimist. So we do have our optimism, but we're always afraid. We're always afraid of our optimism. So, and we always try to hide our optimism because we're afraid that if we're too optimistic, then something really very, very bad will happen. So on one hand, yes, of course, we do see at the moment, we do see a resurgence. There is a resurgence of a power and a sense of control over the street, control over our lives to a certain extent. And this is very important because this is basically what counters the settler colonialist plan, basically. And this, the plan to subdue, the plan to basically empty the land, and to live in the land those who accept the colonialism. But we are here to stay, like Yasser was saying, and we are here to stay with our power, and we're not here to stay only as the the native if you like, docile natives who are willing to take whatever is there. We are here to stay because we do believe in our right, and we do believe that this is our homeland, this is our watan, and there is no other place for us to go. I think what was very important for us Palestinians is that we became or we have crystallized our awareness that we will not allow ourselves to become refugees again. That's it. We are here to stay. We will not go out. We will not be refugees. And whatever happens here, whatever happens to us, we will stay here. And that, of course, means that we know that there is a confrontation because, of course, we are, there are two, again, not only two narratives, but there are two, powers there that are confronting each other. For us, our power is the power of the right, the people with the right. And of course, there is the colonialists, the colonialism, and this clash is constant, but it will accelerate more and more. So now and always there is the clash, and now and always there is the passive optimism.
I'd say that there are many simple and big examples of daily life acts of defiance. We can see them in the clinic as well. I would say that we'd see them in the insistence of people, patients, to treat themselves as real, complete subjects amidst of the brutal and violence of settler colonialism, insisting of coming to clinic and want to deal with themselves as liberated subjects. And we, like after the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh, we could witness the intertwining of the collective and the personal. The personal is infused with the collective is infused with the personal. And it really meets people in different ways, different, they really, we see different examples and inventive ways how the collective issues, how the issues of freedom and justice come to impact the personal and vice versa. So it's really very clear and very inspiring many times to witness it in the clinic. And the scene I described earlier, I think it's one of these acts of really not giving up your humanity in face of direct and indirect silencing that has been operating for many years now.
Lara, can I add something?
Please,
I want to say that I think that Palestine Global Mental Health Network is a defining act. I think also our meetings that we had on liberation psychology is a defining act. It says that we make our own knowledge. We can we can take the knowledge that you gave us and make our own new knowledge that suits us. إنه أطلع بعين نقدية، شو بدي أقول بالإنجليزي؟ عين نقدية. Okay, and like you're looking at what we have,
with a critical view.
With a critical view on what we have learned, and we are making our own knowledge that suits us. I think this is defined also. And like Mustafa said and Rana said, this is in our practice, but you see it everywhere.
Thank you, Rosine. Yasser, anything you would like to add?
I think they have covered it all. I'm not sure if I could rethink. Today in the morning, it's very ironic. I live in the very eastern side of Khan Yunis, and an area that is usually, we have to leave when there are some large scale operations. So in the way, an old man stopped me. I was driving by the car, and usually I do not pick people, but I took him with me. We had to chat a little bit. It was like a 15 minutes drive. So I asked him, because this is something that is all the time in our minds, which is, have you left the last time there were attacks, or did you stay at home? That's something that we all the time ask each other, because it's all the time a question. If there is an attack, then immediately you have to leave the area, or maybe the second or third day. I said, well, yes, we all left. We tried to go to the school that is closest to Salah ad-Din streets, which is a little bit to the west. But you know what? That's what he said to me. Injustice will not continue forever. And I thought to myself, wow, what a response, He should be the therapist, not me. So this is a general feeling of the population that we have really had it, but it's not only us, it's getting close to its end, whether the blockade or the whole conditions. And this is a general feeling. We are not giving up. This is something that I said previously, and I think people who stand in solidarity with our case, they should not also give up. On the contrary, they should speak louder. They should raise their voices. They should narrate our story, which is the right story, not the fake one. And together we are going to celebrate one day soon, inshallah, hopefully, an end to the occupation. Thank you.
That's right. You reminded me of an Ursula Le Guin quote that says, right, that the divine right of kings used to be a power that was inescapable. And it was the time when we couldn't imagine without having kings and kingdoms and queens, and that got overturned. So to keep it in our, not only an imaginary, but our reality, that injustice can't keep going. And it's the same, I think Rana also said, conquerors come and go, right? And that is a reality as well. I'll post the quote, the full quote in there, but let's turn to the questions. So we have a question about reclaiming space, finding new sites of hope through rage oriented around refusal was apparent in all speakers' voices. Can you speak more about rage as informing an anti-colonial praxis? Are they saying we do not fear rage? Are we politicizing it? Do you see it as a psychological response to injustice? So the centering of rage as a necessary tact, and if you all had something to respond to that.
Yeah, the question of rage and anger is the key one. And as Rosine was describing earlier, how during the last May uprising last year, many youth just went to the street and vented their anger, and they confronted the police, and in solidarity, actually in mode of sharing as one people the pain of their Palestinian in Gaza and other places. So the idea of really reclaiming rage as a liberational power, and even in the clinical context we were dealing with it, and I think it's important, like, to resist. Anger is the way, expressing anger and rage is a way to resist the, what I call the emotions police. That's really very central to the settler colonial practices. They want to police your anger, to police your sadness, to police your pain. Like, they don't really, they don't stop at occupying the land and taking siege of all resources. They want really to occupy your soul and really to police your emotions. And I think clinical context should be much more open to this, whether it comes openly or or overtly in the clinical, in the patient's narratives in clinic. So I think, I mean, historically, I recall that in one book of sociology, American one, spoke about how in the late 60s, some American psychiatrists used to diagnose civil movement activists as suffering from anger syndrome, and they were really asked to be treated because of them going into the streets and really struggling for civil rights. So we're not far from it here. And I mean, they're not go into, sometimes it's go into this, like, really labeling anger Palestinians as really, as having some mental health problems. So it's another, it's another something we should resist and question, and really give people the right, and youth as well, to be, because I mean, being anger is really reclaiming life in a way, and freedom.
Does anybody else want to add something?
Yeah, and also the importance that the you know, like the show of rage is to counter the internalization of anger and the fight against debilitation, because the internalizing of anger, of course, is a way that would lead to the feeling of helplessness and debilitation. So the rage is a manifestation of externalizing rather than internalizing that anger. And of course, I mean, it has always been a way that the Israeli settler colonial or the colonialist regime have always like Mustafa was saying, was trying to control this by saying that this is a show of primitive aggression, and that the Palestinians are not able to control. I mean, okay, we have an English audience, and of course, I mean, Palestinians are not like the English that are able to be very collected. No, I mean, we're not, but that's part of our Mediterranean culture. We're not collected, and I think this, which was always a way to actually target us and also to label us by saying that we are not we are primitive, and therefore we need to be controlled. And this is the colonialist narrative, that these are primitive, they're not able to be living in the civilized way, and therefore our colonialism is basically important and is also helpful because it's helping them become civilized. And I think our ability to accept this rage and to be able to live in harmony with this rage is countering that narrative and countering that subjugation by saying, okay, you're okay, you're going to be listened to if you do it this way, and you're going to take what you want, and it's like, you know, like we know what's best for you, and if you do it this way, we listen to you. No, we're saying, no, this is our rage and we own it, and we know where it's coming from, and for us it is a decision to externalize it and not to internalize it.
How powerful. I was also laughing when you said about the British. Well, it's easy to be collected when you're the imperialist in the room, right? Or the colonialist. And I think that's part of it. I love what you're saying, Rana, that this is a defiance of the logics, that if one party is collected, the other party is the one who holds all the rage. And so what is it like then to own the rage and say, if it's set up so that I'm the one who's holding the rage, at least I can manage it and channel it and make it known, right? To disrupt what looks organic, but is actually part of a larger structure of oppression. Anything others want to say? Rosie and Yasser, about rage? Go ahead.
I just want to say about what Mustafa said about the police wanting to manage the emotions. I think that for us here, clinicians, I think sometimes it's not always clear. Sometimes sometimes things get confused in a way that, I mean, for example, the parents of captivated youngsters were used as when they put into captive in their own homes. Their parents were against those, sometimes were very hard on their kids because of what the police said. So after they went home, they were the hands and eyes of the police, even if they didn't want to be in that place. I think sometimes it's also for us, it's not easy to know when the situation is very vague and it's not clear when you are sometimes serving the police emotions. And this is why what Mustafa said about working in Maana and this place is very important to know to remember who you are, what you are in the situations, and what you can give to people. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Why don't we go on to the next question, and then Yasser, of course, feel free to add if something comes to your mind. So there's somebody asking about academic boycott that many of you touched on. They say, I'm a student in Germany and I've been encountering this problem when writing papers and courses and having to employ sources. Required reading is infested with colonial thought, and we're expected to absorb these writings and reproduce them in our texts. Additionally, only published sources are deemed worthy to be included in academic writing, which is a way of information presenting that's so hard to access as someone who's marginalized or impoverished. Do you have any advice with managing all these competing factors on getting the truth out on colonialism and the violence against Palestinians? تفضل مصطفى.
No, Rana probably the most fit for this. No, okay.
Yes, did
Well,
you want to?
Yeah,
Please.
I mean, it's different now from the 90s. I mean, there are many international, well-known with high impact factors journals who simply publish research studies that come out of Palestinian and non-Palestinian academics who run research in various Palestinian territories or areas, you know. And of course, some of them, we usually go under very scrutinized, how to say, peer review process. But usually, sometimes, unfortunately, we have to change the journal that we apply to. But at the end of the day, you will find in academia and international academia, you will find many places that report, that publish what happens in Palestine. So that could be a little bit more difficult, but it's there. I mean, with more research, you will find he or she will be able to find the needed articles, and I think there will be no problem in sharing those, let me say, findings or results or conclusions when it comes from well-known international journals. It's not easy, but also it's not difficult. It's doable, and there are many articles there out there.
Yeah, very reputable. I think with us, Dr. Kevorkian is here and she's well published, and also the ICPH, the Institute of Community and Public Health, whether we're talking about Dr. Jakaman or we're talking about the Institute, it's also very well published with all their academic staff there, and they do publish in peer-reviewed reputable journals, and they can be quoted, of course. And I think with the ICPH, I'm saying the ICPH, which is again the Institute of Community and Public Health, because basically from the start, that was their idea, that silencing cannot be done against the Palestinian on the claim that the research is not credible, and they have exposed that systematic way of trying to silence Palestinians by supposedly claiming that our research or our views are not credible. And I think since then they have been very keen, they and many other Palestinians, to be there and published, and they're very, very well exposed in the international journals and also very important journals in every field where we're talking about science, we're talking about social science, and so on. So you can find a lot of material here.
I would add, first of all, solidarity to you. All of us who are in academia are in this quandary of resisting settler colonial hegemony the world, right? So I'm talking about being also in the United States and feeling like, and working alongside my students to say, how do we sort of upend what is presented to us as a natural social order? And that's what you're talking about also. Even if you're not talking about Palestine, everything we read normalizes, right, a colonial mentality. And so I just want to mention to support what my colleagues have been saying, just in the past 2 years, what the shifting tide has been. So for example, our comrades in South Africa have a journal, Social and Health Sciences, that Nadir Kevorkian and Stephanie Wahab just published in a couple months ago about the Freedom Tunnel. We have a special issue of the Sexuality and Gender Studies in the United States that published an entire special edition about Fanon, and Palestine is front and center in that. We have the International Journal of Applied Psychoanalysis, which Martin Kemp did a special issue about settler colonialism. Nadira Shalhoub, Abir Athman, Samah Jabir were published in this. Psychoanalysis, Culture and Society is another journal. So we really are at a place not only to challenge settler colonialism, but to say we no longer need them for our sources, for our references, for writing, for setting the tone for the narrative, right? The most special thing about the book that Stephen and I wrote was to platform the work that's already been done. We didn't invent anything. Our generous colleagues that you see here today invite us into their spaces to document and uplift the work that's already being done. So part of that is saying, how can we also work with the politics of citation? And I'm speaking to you as a graduate student. There is a politics of citation, right? It's about saying, yes, you're a good scholar. That belongs in a footnote. If you need to mention a source that is not indigenous, that belongs in a footnote. But what belongs in the center of your work is the Palestinian voices and indigenous voices that we're hearing today. And that is an act and an intervention and another act of everyday revolution, like Razin was saying in Liberation, is to really platform these voices and say, we refuse to use those even as sources. And I think this is part of the boycott that's really important. Okay, let me go to another question we have here. Mustafa spoke about the self-silencing that Palestinian academics and mental health workers endure. I'm curious if he can speak more to the training and internship process of Palestinian mental health workers and their reliance on Israeli institutions. And I think all of you have some version of that to speak. And perhaps I can extend it further, is to speak about some of the contraptions that people can't get around. But because I know you all the ways you are getting around Israeli institutionalization as well. Tafadhalu.
Well, I mean, speaking about the Palestinian clinicians within Israel, I think it's probably one of the most complicated situations to a clinician to operate in. It's a it's very complex, and because I mean, it's historically, and the situation is still the same even now. I mean, Palestinian clinicians in Israel used to be trained in Israeli institutions and by Israeli colleagues, Jewish Israeli colleagues, and in those processes of training and specialization, many topics were taboo. Like, I mean, politics was out of the story, and that especially in tense times, in war times, and actually one of the main intimate part of the psyche of a clinician was kind of cut off and not taken into consideration. Yet, I mean, there are few Israeli colleagues who are more responsive, more open to these issues. But on the whole, it's really a kind of a painful sometimes process. I mean, on the professional level, it's a very, advantageous, and it's a good one. But I mean, how can you tell it's good enough if really you're asked to kind of silence different parts of you, and you do it, it's done not in a harsh way, not in a kind of a violent way, let's say, I mean, psychologically violent way, but I mean, it's there, it's in the air, and with few exceptions, it's the mainstream. So usually, I mean, Palestinian clinicians would try to protect these parts of them alive, but they've had to do it in other contexts and like splitting sometimes parts of themselves and trying to connect them in different ways. In Maana Center is a kind of a counter response to this. We cooperate with Jewish colleagues. I mean, it's not about persons or individuals, but it's about the whole system. And but we do it on our terms, let's say. We have a different kind of interactions, different kind of cooperation, and different kind of dialogue, professional one, clinical one, and personal one.
If you allow me to add something here, Lara, I mean, I know that the question was put onto Mustafa, but one thing about the cooperation there, or the internship, or the work, or the supervision, or whatever you want. Now, there is an important aspect. I mean, there is, of course, the reality on the ground, but there is something very, very deep that is always a problem. And that is, how can one really have faith in that other who is part of that system? And we're talking here about something so intimate, you know, you're sharing your psyche, you're sharing your experiences. And that person there, whether that is an academician or that there is a supervisor, is part of the system. And unfortunately, not many have allowed themselves to take themselves away from the system. They affiliate with the system. So basically, you are forced to learn, or you're forced to work with someone who basically is also part of that system that is the source of your pain. And at the same time, that person is claiming that he wants to be part of your healing. So I think that the clash happens there, that part of the, or that source of pain cannot be a source of healing. So it's very complex, it's very difficult, but that's the reality of it. And that's why we now look towards ourselves for like support and learning and sharing knowledge, because that's also very important aspect.
That ties into what Rosine was saying about the Palestine Global Mental Health Network, right? Is that to not even have to rely on good colleagues to produce knowledge, that you produce knowledge all together, that you train each other. And folks, I just want to tell you that my colleagues here are so humble that they would never talk about just how life-changing and affirming these spaces that they have created and work alongside each other to make are. We had the luck and honor of visiting these spaces, and a shout out to Najla Asmar too at Maana Clinic with Mustafa. And the central piece also that might be very subtle is that they work in Arabic. They work in Arabic, and under a settler colonial regime, this might feel very simple, but under a settler colonial regime where everything is replaced, where language of the colonizer becomes what is used, what is internalized, what is talked about, to have a space where trainees can be trained in Arabic with Palestinian supervisors, with a Palestinian network, is revolutionary, let alone the things that Rana you've shared, or Yasser you've shared, and Rosina I've come to know about your work too, about funding sources, about what to refuse and what not, and what to take, and all these different ways that, again, that's why I wanted to extend, how do you also resist? Because the structure is hard, but I know all of you to be also working against the restrictions that are set upon you. So I have the unfortunate task of watching the clock. So this question might be a beautiful place to end. And perhaps we can start with Yasser and work our way around, maybe do the opposite of how you all started. right? And the question is this, what can the international mental health community do to support the psychological well-being of Palestinians and of our colleagues? There is something important we, working elsewhere in the world, can take from all the speakers regarding the questioning of the supposed political neutrality of the clinic and even the politics of our innermost emotions. I was very struck by what Mustafa said about the Palestinian psyche being the ultimate site of settler colonialism. This is also true of all of us living within capitalism, albeit generally, of course, under less brutal conditions. Sometimes, that was me in parentheses. So although we work in very different contexts, nonetheless, it's important to learn from what our colleagues are saying and recognize that their insights aren't only confined to working in Palestine. So it's an internationalist call, but perhaps the question is, what can the international community lend itself to you all? Alongside, and I want to sort of really say, in locking arms, not in deciding for you all, but in locking arms with you. What do you need from us all?
I could think of, let me say, three options or three ways. The first one is support and defend the people who work in the academia, who are trying their best to bring the Palestinian story to the international community. By the way, those people, they do not do things out of, they usually follow the standards of research methodology. They do things in a very perfect way. However, they are still challenged when it comes to publication. So help people, stand in solidarity with student justice for Palestine groups who are scrutinized all over universities internationally, not in certain country or the other, but it's a big struggle. Identify your Palestinian colleagues and colleagues who start or who support Palestinians and stand in solidarity with them. Stand clearly, stand visibly, and spread the word. That's one aspect of it. The second one is stay in touch with your Palestinian colleagues. There are quite well-known Palestinian organizations and Palestinian scholars and Palestinian researchers and Palestinian mental health workers. And now Palestinian networks, it's not only Palestine Global. We have the the UK Palestine Mental Health Network. We have the USA Palestine Mental Health Network. We have the South African Palestine Mental Health Network. We have the Ireland Palestine Mental Health Network. And I think Belgium, etc., etc. We need to see more of those networks. So it's a call to have more networks that come in solidarity with the Palestinian mental health workers. And then the third part of it, which is, there are various things that happen when it comes to new interventions and new adaptations and new methodologies, for example, to work with trauma or to work with, yes, we are in Gaza trauma experts, unfortunately, because of what happens around us. We are in Palestine also trauma experts. But still, we are open to benefit from what works outside Palestine. The international community now is suffering in different places because of various attacks on humanity. There is a big space for sharing experience, but we all the time need to keep in mind the sensitivity of the Palestinian issue and the culture of the Palestinian people. So we need all the time to have the right entrance point, and then the right type of work. So these are the three main things that I could think of. Thank you.
Rosine?
I think that Dr. Yasser has summarized it. I agree upon everything that he said. The importance of standing by our professors that are being attacked all the time, and what he said about what he said about the importance of staying connected with us. I want to say also the importance of telling the story, continue telling the story, although you may face although your professor won't like it, or the one, or your supervisor don't like it. Continue telling the story, and I think it's very important.
Thank you. Rana, تفضلي.
I think what is very important is, in the first place, is to work globally against colonialism. And I think the working against colonialism is to bring this kind of sharing, real sharing and solidarity, and not from a person of like, what do you do and what do you want and I can give it, but basically of what I need and what you can give it. I think what we need also in Palestine, that type of like working together. I think that there, again, like Yasser was saying, we do have a tremendous knowledge that we have accumulated, unfortunately, through this pain and misery. But again, it's very important to also share it. It's also very important to expose the Palestinian clinicians and Palestinian academicians to also the people in the world globally, and therefore also to have the world be more exposed to the narratives there. And I think in that sense, there is this a feeling that there is this fight against saying that the haves and the have-nots, and those who are owning and those who are not able to have that access. So that is a very important way to fight colonialism and to fight capitalism at the same time. I think that our fight against colonialism and capitalism as a collective together is what will bring the world to a different, a better place, whether we're talking about going from the basis of saying that that there is human knowledge and human experience that have to be shared, and there isn't one important knowledge that has to be shared, but that human knowledge has to be shared, is the first place to start and fight the idea that there are those who own and have, and there are those who are just on the recipient end of that knowledge and have. And I think this is very important. And again, like I said it also in my presentation, the activism to be activists, to be there doing what you can do in the fight of colonialism. And what we were talking and what Yasser was talking about in our meeting together is okay, I mean, for us Palestinians, if you fight against the wall around Mexico, or you fight against any cause in the world, we also feel that this is also part of the fight for Palestine, because these are all the elements of evil that has made that colonialism be there. So that fight in itself is, again, a very important fight for us. And when we call for the BDS, it's not only calling for the boycott of Israel, but also the divestment from those super power and super international agencies or international companies that are actually controlling the world. So our boycott is boycotting those establishments that are in the core of colonialism. And when we're talking about also, when I talked about the narrative, it's again the narrative of those who are there and have the right to have their narrative said, because they know and they have the ability, they have the right to express themselves and not to have anybody talk instead of them.
Comrade Rana, thank you. Mustafa, تفضل.
Well, I first of all, I'd like to thank everybody, and thank you, Lara and Luke, and all the attendees. We're very happy with this opportunity. I would say that's important. I would ask my colleagues out there to keep their eyes open, their voice raised, and to let the Palestinians be heard. And I would reiterate the quote, the call, the phrase of the protagonist of Ghassan Kanafani iconic novel, Men in the Sun. Keep on knocking on the wall of the tank. Don't give up. I mean, don't stay in silence. I mean, we are trying not to stay in silence, and you too, I mean, keep knocking. The wall will crumble down somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. The wall will fall. Thank you everybody. شكرا لكم. يعطيكم ألف عافية وأنتم فرحتوا لي قلبي والله. Thank you everybody for being with us, and Palestine will be free.